everybody is having an excellent week. Welcome to OHMazing Entrepreneurs. My name is Michael Riley, and today, once again, here with the amazing Cathy Miron from eSilo. Today's episode is a deep dive into security, compliance, and backups, and why the SMB should care. So, with that out of the way, I'm going to pass it over to you, Cathy. Tell us a little bit about yourself and eSilo.
Sure. So Cathy Miron, I'm the president and CEO of eSilo. We are a data backup and cybersecurity company, as you said, and we help small and mid-sized organizations prepare for the day when they're hit with a cyber attack. We'll do assessments to help them understand and identify those gaps and get them remediated ahead of time. We offer offsite backup and disaster recovery services so that when those attacks happen, they can get back up and running quickly and minimize downtime. And then lastly, we help train and educate their staff and C-suite so they understand where their risks are, what they should be budgeting for their technology, and how to teach everybody in the organization to be cyber vigilant.
Awesome. Thanks again. So if you guys haven't had a chance, check out last week's episode. Cathy dives into her experience purchasing eSilo. She's been on with them since 2018. And yeah, excited. Being a technology company myself, I understand and appreciate the work that you do. However, I don't do it as much or in depth as you do. So, tell me a little bit about what is your typical SMB challenges when it comes to compliance and security?
Sure. So it all depends on the industry and the size of the company. But if I give you a typical profile, we're looking at a business of 20 to 50, employees. Usually there's an office manager, some kind of operations leader, but there isn't really any senior level technology person on staff. There may not even be any IT people in the company at all. They may entirely outsource that to an MSP or managed service provider to be their outsourced IT department.
Sure.
But the challenge that I think a lot of those size businesses have is that technology is absolutely critical to the way that they operate day to day. The users or the folks in the office don't really have a great understanding of technology, how to use it, how to secure it, things that they should or should not be doing, even just opportunities to improve processes and efficiency through automation and just better leveraging the tools that they have. So oftentimes they fall victim to cyber attacks, or you have people in the office making silly mistakes. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've gotten a phone call where somebody in the office says, "Oh, I accidentally deleted, this shared folder that had 10,000 files in it from the share drive."
Mm-hmm.
And whether that share drive is like a shared folder on someone's computer or it's a real, file server in the closet, then they don't know what to do about it. And so the smart ones at least have some level of backup. Hopefully it's not just a USB stick attached to the server,
Right.
Or something manual that somebody has to do. Hopefully it's going to be something better like offsite cloud backups, which is one of the things that we offer. But that's usually the extent of what those smaller offices are doing for their own data protection.
Sure.
They're hoping and trusting that whoever's responsible for their technology is doing everything else that they should be to keep them safe. But a lot of times if you ask a small business owner or executive, what are you guys doing for cybersecurity? If you had an attack tomorrow, how do you think you would fare? Or if you still have physical equipment in the office, if the server died tomorrow, how long would you be down for? Have you thought through your plan for the day that technology doesn't work seamlessly the way that you expect it to when you come in the morning?
Right.
And I think you'd get met with a lot of blank stares.
Right. Or what happens if a hurricane comes through?
Yeah. So we live in South Florida. I have heard people tell me that they pack up the server and they put it in the trunk of their car and take it with them. That is not a fantastic DR strategy.
I honest to God, back prior to me, starting Amazing Tech, but we had a DR process, and part of the DR process was that one server in the closet, literally unrack it, unplug it, take it out, put it in the CEO's car, and they drive it home.
Yep.
And that was okay. mean,
Offsite recovery strategy.
that's one way to live life, right? So, but yeah, it seems, that was a few years ago. I know stuff is not necessarily all on-prem, but some is. Do you guys do cloud, like a public cloud backups as well?
Yes. So we do help clients protect their public cloud data. So like Microsoft 365, Google Workspace, those are the two main ones. But I will say that the cloud backups that we offer to our clients, meaning where we're going to store their data, is actually a private eSilo cloud.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So a lot of our clients are in regulated industries. So think attorneys, accountants, wealth managers, insurance brokers. And then, of course, we have a lot of folks in the healthcare field. So whether that's private practice or regional healthcare offices. And so although things are changing, there has always been a little bit of hesitancy around moving to public cloud, partly because it requires a totally different skill set for your staff,
Right.
And different knowledge of how to secure your data in cloud. But also because there was a lot of regulatory uncertainty of, well, how are the regulators going to look at me putting my losing control and custodianship of my client data. And so that is where eSilo originally started. It was helping
Right.
those types of businesses. And so we have 2 co-location data centers, one in Florida, one in Tennessee. So we have geo redundancy, and that is where we house our clients' information.
Yeah, and both strong states. Born in Tennessee, moved to Florida. So, I mean, it's both near and dear to my heart. So,
We chose them just for you.
fair enough. See, but that's good. I would say as well, from, knowing a little knowledge coming from where, our company's positioned, public cloud is not always the cheapest solution. And then, it's flat out does not fly with some compliance. So like, if it's, government server, you cannot put that on public cloud. If it's, if you have some level of security clearance, cannot be on public cloud. It's just not an option. So they have different clouds for that.
Yeah.
But still, if you're in some sort of regulated industry, it might not always be the best route.
And I know that all too well. So when I was at GE, one of the jobs I had after that CTO job we talked about
Right.
was strategic initiatives for cloud. So at the time we had about 56 major data centers worldwide. And the plan was to reduce that footprint, save on the real estate and the
Sure.
operational and the hardware and all those costs, and move a significant portion of those workloads to public cloud. And this was, again, 10 years ago, where at the time we did not feel comfortable at all with the security. So our security architects and engineers worked with Amazon, worked with Microsoft. I think we were also working maybe with Verizon and one other provider to build in the level of controls that an enterprise would need to feel comfortable putting information into public cloud. Now, a lot of that has now been built into the core product.
Right.
And that was kind of the play at the time. That was the sales pitch on, we're going to help you develop a more secure, better product where your client has more control. And then you can turn around and go sell that to all the rest of the Fortune 500.
Right.
So I think things have come a long way, but still there's a lot of hesitancy around things that people don't understand. And one of the biggest misconceptions that drives me crazy, so I'm going to get on my soapbox for a minute.
No, please, by all means.
Everybody thinks that cloud data is automatically backed up. Like, well, it's already in the cloud, so it must be safe. It must be this. It must be that. And I would tell you that you have to always read the fine print, because even if a cloud provider has backups for their own disaster and recovery purposes, you're not always going to be able to take advantage of that. So what I mean is, if the cloud provider has a major outage or major issue, then they can use their backups and their redundancy to make your data available from some other region or zone. That's fantastic. If you pay enough for that, level of service, that's fantastic. But if you experience corruption or some other kind of issue with your data itself, you accidentally delete a whole bunch of stuff that you didn't mean to, they're not going to go whip that out of their backups for you and restore it necessarily.
Right.
So
right.
that's something that you have to be really careful of.
It can be expensive too.
Yes. And so what I always tell people is that all the cloud is equipment in someone else's data center.
Amen. I say it's Spanish for somebody else's computer. So.
Exactly. So, it used to be a server in your closet in the office, right? Your network room. and you move that over to some cloud service, it is still a server in some bigger room and run by really trained people who, build redundancy in and who are thinking about security and are thinking about redundant power and redundant network. So all the things that you expect. So they are going to run it in a much more professional way than you would if it was sitting in your office. But it is still equipment in someone else's data center. And when you look at the top causes of data loss, it is human error and hardware failure are still two of the top reasons why data gets lost. And so data in the cloud is still susceptible to hardware failure. It's still running on hardware. It's engineered to withstand, right, failures of equipment. So I'm not trying to say that that's not a part of it, but and the cloud is managed by and designed and architected by humans. So you can still have all of the failure modes that can happen to your data when it's in your own server happen in the cloud. I think it's less likely. I mean, definitely the probability is way lower, but it's not that everything is auto magic. And you don't have to worry about data protection. You don't have to worry about backups. You don't have to take your own backups if you want to maintain control over your information.
Right. And that brings me into my, a nice question for that's, all this sounds great, but like if I am, I've got 20 people, and I'm a small business, like where do I start?
So one of the best things to do is to get a cybersecurity assessment. You can have a company come in, do a health check, and they will be able to tick off, I'll say, the top 20 things that you should be doing. And based on that, you'll find right away if you have gaping holes, if you don't have multi-factor authentication on all of your key systems.
Right.
And for anyone who doesn't know, MFA just means that you use multiple factors to authenticate yourself to any system. That's usually a combination of something you know, which is a password, and something you have, which is a 6-digit code. You might get it on your phone or from an authenticator app. And there's other factors that can be used as well, IP address and biometrics and certificates and things like that. But that's a very simple example of one of the most effective security controls you can have in place. And we can diagnose almost immediately, if you have it or don't. Right. And so there's, 15, 20 other things like that. And you have somebody come in and do an assessment like this, and they'll be able to give you recommendations on do this first, do this second, do this third to remediate it. And that's going to give you a great roadmap for how to improve your overall technology and your cybersecurity. And then let's say you are green on all those 20 things. Now we can actually get into a real assessment against industry standard frameworks that are, instead of 20 things, it'll be 100 things.
Right.
And we'll go through in much finer grain detail to identify areas where you have opportunity to improve and be stronger and more resilient in the way that you manage your systems.
So you're talking like a HIPAA or a SOC compliance or something like that. If you're like in a specific sort of if you own a business, you probably know if you're need to legally uphold to one of these, right?
I would hope so, but I would tell you that we've worked with plenty of healthcare companies that have patient records, and they don't ask us to sign a BAA, Business Associate Agreement, which is required for any suppliers that are going to handle, or potentially be handling patient data for the covered entity. And so don't take it for granted that everybody knows the regulations that they need to comply with. I think it's actually a great time for a public service announcement to make sure that you're spending some time working with legal counsel or a business advisor or somebody, an industry association even, to understand what are all the things that apply to you. Not just because of the industry and nature of work that you do, but also the country and state of residency of the people whose private information you might hold as part of doing business.
Right, because I mean, if something does happen, and it's almost disastrous, and not just like disastrous from a financial standpoint, but also from a legal standpoint as well. So, and that's what I appreciate about you and eSilo is like, hey, I'm not trying to. It's not necessarily some sort of scare tactic to get into to do something. It's more along the lines of, hey, I've got, as a business owner and somebody who employs 5, 10, 20 people, any level of business, I've been doing any sort of significant revenue to where you're supporting yourself and to you're supporting your clients. it's one of those things that I necessarily don't, I don't think about insurance whenever I start my business. What do I know about insurance? I'm an IT guy, but like whenever I started doing some business, started working with, hey, do you have general liability? Do you have, cyber insurance? Do you have all these things and checks and balances? And one of those things is, hey, making sure that I'm doing due diligence on protecting the data that I have good controls in place in order to secure. And if I don't know, I don't know. So what's the barrier of entry for something like that to do like a quick, I guess, health check?
So they're really affordable for businesses. We have offerings that are as low as $2,000 to do a complete cybersecurity health check. But if we're doing something a little bit deeper, it might be, 8 to 10 weeks of effort, and we're talking, significantly more money. So
Right.
I would say, though, that it should never be something that prevents a company from asking the hard questions about what they're doing to handle information. I think the cost of an assessment and the cost to remediate items that are identified is a tiny fraction of what the cost is when you are subject to a breach or a violation or a fine or a sanction. And so you think about, pay $1 today to save $10 tomorrow.
Right.
That's really where we're coming at it from.
Right. So can you give me an example of give me a real world example as much as you can, right?
Yeah.
Thank God I did that.
A close call averted.
I mean, a close call averted.
So I'll tell you a story. There was a MSP, because this one's like in your backyard. There was an MSP that they're still around, about 200 or so South Florida-based companies that were their clients. And some of these companies were, accounting offices, law offices, interior designers, your typical Main Street small business.
Right.
But some of those clients are sports teams and ones that you and I would have watched on TV.
Gotcha.
So their clientele kind of ran a big range. And a couple years ago, I think this was right before COVID, the MSP got hit with ransomware. And they had a security compromise is actually how I'll describe it. And all of their clients were hit with ransomware. So all 200 clients were attacked. It was Russian. It was of Russian origin. The FBI was involved, and so that's kind of how I know what they were able to pinpoint. And some of them were fine because they had advanced endpoint detection software that detected those intrusions and those attacks and locked it down immediately. But many of the smaller companies that were not on the latest, anti-malware and detection and response tools, either because they wanted to save money or, whatever, all of their systems were encrypted. And so it was days before those clients who are calling the MSP constantly, sending emails, trying to get a hold of somebody, could even get a response from somebody on staff because their staff was so completely overwhelmed with the issue. And of course, dealing with, their own internal systems issues. And so the reason I found out about all of this is because there was about a dozen or so clients that were affected in this attack that were also clients of eSilo. And it just happened to be that a long, long time ago, we had built relationships with those companies. And I don't know, if we came first or the MSP came first. But either way, they had an MSP, but they still paid us for their offsite backups as an additional measure of insurance and protection. And if you look at what, it costs to do offsite backups, it's a fraction of the cost of an MSP. So it was kind of, we were rounding error on what they were doing. Because of the...
Thank you, Cathy.
Because of that situation, though, I mean, I talked to a lot of engineers at that MSP at the time, and they hadn't slept for 36, 48 hours. They were pulling guys off the billing team to answer phones and provide level 1 help desk support because they were really just, everyone was running ragged. They were trying to do the best that they could, but it was just sheer volume of work was absolutely overwhelming. So those clients had actually called us up right away, and they said, "Hey, I can't get a call back, from the MSP, but I don't know what's going on. My systems, I can't log in. There's this ransom note on the screen. Everything is like garbage. Like all my data is there, but like I can't read it. It's totally unusable. Like what do I do?" Well, good for you. That's what we do. And so we were able to then recover their data from our offsite backups as soon as we got the green light. So FBI, the insurance companies, think about all the attorneys that were kind of involved. They were gathering forensic evidence. But as soon as we got the green light to, yes, start restoring data and systems, we were able to do that from almost immediately. And so those dozen clients were fine and back up and running while everyone else is still waiting for a tech to show up at their
Right.
office. And that's an example of why you want to have offsite backups, one, but why you want redundant backups with different vendors on different systems managed by different people, so that if there is an attack that happens and it affects all the Windows machines in the office or compromises certain user accounts, especially accounts of your IT administrators, well, it's very likely that those compromised accounts can be used to then access the backups managed by those same people and then essentially destroy your backups so you have no fallback option. And that's what happened. The MSP was taking backups of everything, except those backups were compromised, as was everything else.
Yes, of course.
And because we were totally separate on a Linux-based system, different team, different accounts, not connected to the domain, on and on, separate VPN, our backups were totally fine. And we were able to restore that for them without issue. So that's like my classic example of why you want backups with an outside provider, in addition to whatever you're doing.
It's a very good example.
Yeah.
And thanks for beating up on my industry. So, it's okay. It's competition, So
Yeah, exactly. We're taking out other guys down here.
This was not me. So we just went over this example. Was not amazing tech. But, this is very good information. We're going to pause here for a second. We do have bills to pay. And so with that being said, I'm going to do a quick ad read in, and then we'll jump back in. And I've got a couple more compelling questions to start from there. Question. So again, are you guys expanding and onboarding starting to become a challenge? Are you concerned about security and have no idea where to start? Well, this is the episode for you. Are you considering hiring IT staff to handle your growing technology challenges? Look no further than OHMazing.tech, your one-stop shop for a fully virtual IT department. With OHMazing Tech, we specialize in creating a stress-free onboarding process for your new users. Once onboarded, leave the technical stress of managing your environment to us and backing up with eSilo. Our team of skilled experts is dedicated to keeping your systems running smoothly 24/7. Focus on what you do best while we handle the technology. From BCIO services, technology procurement, and CRM management, we handle it all for one low monthly rate. Experience the ease of managed IT services with OHMazing.tech. Visit our website at OHMazing.tech. That's OHMazing.tech. Transform your IT worries into amazing results. And you know what? That ad read right after that story, I don't know if that was but it's fine. It's fine. It is, because in all honesty, we are prime targets. From an attacker standpoint, like, you want to hit the guys with why hit, if I could hit 20 different organizations versus I could hit one organization and,
It's a supply chain.
Right. It's a supply chain attack, right? So we actually went through the health check process ourselves with eSilo, and, it was a very insightful process. We got to learn, a little bit about ourselves, things that we were doing well, a couple things that we weren't doing that we could be doing that we should be doing well. So we got value there. And I think, a compelling case on that is just like, if you never know, then, the cost of that is like, the barrier of entry is so low. And you get so much value, or at least peace of mind, to be like, you know what, at least I know I'm doing what I should be doing. Because if I'm not experienced in it, like I said, I have no idea about insurance. Like, I know a little bit more about it now that I had to procure it. Now we've renewed it a few times, but prior to that, I don't know in general. I don't know anything about what I need or what I possibly need until I talk to somebody who worked in the industry.
And that's actually, you mentioned cyber insurance. That's one of the biggest drivers of these kinds of assessments and conversations that we're having
Really?
with clients, is They are being told that they need insurance because their client requires it as part of the contract. So, we have a management consulting firm that's been a client of ours, a fractional CIO and CISO engagement for the last 2 years or so now.
Okay.
And John, one of the managing partners, originally came to us and said, look, we are going after, they're productivity consultants. We are going after some of the Fortune 500 type companies to help them streamline their operations and manage cost and think, energy, chemicals, like those sectors. So these are very large companies. And as part of the, 25-page contract to be a supplier with them, they require certain levels of insurance, certain levels of assurance around the access to information that they have, because there's a lot of financial information, not personal information, but financials and stuff about their operations and kind of metrics and things that if they were publicly disclosed would be harmful to the company. We need to be able to sign these contracts with confidence that we can actually fulfill those obligations. And so that's how we started with them. And over time, the engagement has evolved to be many other things. But they realized, they saw it was like a 5 or 6 page cyber insurance application. They said, I don't even understand the questions that they're asking, let alone are we doing the things that they're asking for. So that's often a place that we start. Now that we've been working with them for 2 years, we've helped them to implement everything that's on that sheet. And by the way, in the last couple of years, those 5-page applications are now like 10-page applications because the cyber risk industry has just, they've been paying out so many claims. You have to be real careful, because if you're not truthful on those applications, or if you can't demonstrate and prove that you had the controls that you said that you have, they're just looking for an excuse to deny claims.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like any insurance. We don't want, well, we got you. Okay, I need you. Well, wait.
Yeah. Like a good neighbor.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not home when you need help.
Yeah. But, it's the company's suspicious when their whole marketing pitch is, you can trust us.
Yeah. You can't trust people who say, just trust me. I got you.
You can trust me. So, but, I find that very interesting, because we've been talking about, like, specifically, what, maybe it's an assumption. Do you feel like all of our listeners are familiar with, what ransomware is and what catastrophic impact it does have on their business?
I guess I'm in the world so much that I assume everyone knows.
Let's refresh it just in case.
Fair. Yeah.
Yeah. So just in case, if you ever walked into a business and like nobody can log in, nobody can access their data, or the data that they do download or the data that they do interact with says gibberish, that means it's been encrypted, and encrypted is with a key, and a key is an algorithm that encrypts against, and the algorithm is mathematically improbable to crack on one device. And so if you get hit with ransomware, you've got 100 different, however, each device has its own encryption key. And so whenever you have to buy, like I've seen, like, it's not, you cracking it and decrypting it yourself is just not going to happen. The FBI doesn't have a tool for that. The CIA doesn't have a tool for that. That's why blockchain is blockchain. I know it's become like kind of a more of a prevalent thing, but it's not something that, like, if you get hit with ransomware, your choices are really restore or pay it.
Yeah, it's pay the ransom, lose your data, or if you're lucky enough and you have backups, restore from a backup and hope to God it works.
Right. Well, that's important. So, like, what's the it works part? So
there was a study by Veeam, I want to say a year or two ago, that 58% of attempted recoveries from backups fail, either because of an issue during the recovery process or because there was an issue with the backups themselves. And so, you and I in the break were chatting a little bit about this. Most people think, well, a backup's a backup, right? They're all kind of the same, and I just need to know if it works, and I just need to know if it's restorable, right? And what I would tell you is that, at least if you're asking the question about is it restorable, you're further than 90% of the people.
Yeah. I personally have done a backup restore, and we're like, oh, thank God we've got that backed up. And then we go to restore it, and it blue screens. And when I say blue screens, like, you go to boot up the image, and it's like you're smoked. And
Yeah.
you're sitting there thinking, well, that didn't work. So,
So like, what's plan B?
what's plan B?
Yeah.
Because plan A, plan B, and plan C is, or, you're out of options.
I was going to say, hopefully your plan B was, well, eSilo's also got a copy of backups. Let me call them.
Yes, yes. Well, they encrypt the backups. So
Yeah.
if they have network connect, so if like all my, so the way it works is, hey, I get infected, and then it starts jumping to other machines on the network.
Yes.
And then it jumps to other networks in the same ecosystem of the network itself. And
Anything connected.
And so if it's connected to it, it's going to encrypt it, and they will charge you to pay. So even if I think there's so much value in the backup, and the truth is, like, if you do get hit with it, if you do have valid restores, it's just a matter of time for you to. I mean, the backup and running part is just so good, and then the disclosure part. What do you say you do get hit with it, right? What do you tell your clients? How does that conversation
It's funny.
go?
I had two places I wanted to go, and now you just asked me a third question.
Then go through all of them.
I'm going to come back to that one.
Okay.
Remind me
Okay.
about the clients. The first thing I was going to say, back on sort of how ransomware takes hold and why it's so deadly for a business. As you described it, this is a malware, right? So like a virus that can move from machine to machine.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we call that lateral movement. And if you don't have a good MSP who's securing your systems and the configurations of those systems,
Right.
you can make it so that it's really easy for an attacker to go from machine to machine to get a hold of one user account and then elevate their privileges. So maybe they can compromise an average user's account, and depending on how things are set up, they can elevate that user's account to have admin level privileges. And now they can delete stuff, copy stuff, exfiltrate your data, which means, download it and walk away with it and post it on the internet and threaten to expose that information publicly if you don't pay.
Sell it.
Right?
Yeah.
So the worst kind of ransomware attack is what they call double extortion. So you have to pay in order to get your data back and, function and run as a business. And also you have to pay because if you don't pay me, I'm going to post it online. I'm going to sell your data on the dark web. The backup, so like kind of switching back over to the backup side, they're going to help you with the first part, right? We're going to help you recover your information so that you frankly have a business to come back to.
Right.
What we can't do is unwind the clock and get data down off the dark web that's already been posted. Like when the horse is bolted, it's your data's gone. So that is the importance of doing the proactive cybersecurity reviews and the assessments to say, how do I close all the holes so that it's that much harder for any bad guys to get in and steal stuff, right? So that's kind of one. On the backup side, for years and years and years, there was this golden rule, 3-2-1. You've heard of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they say 3-2-1 rule for backups. You want 3 copies of data on at least 2 different types of storage media with 1 copy both off-site and off-network. And so let's break that down. 3 copies means that if it's important, you want multiple copies of that information. So the first one's going to be your primary production copy. So it's the one you're using every day. And then that implies that then there's 2 backups. And why 2, not just 1? Because, hey, if it's really important, sometimes backups go corrupt or they can't be restored. And so you want to have at least...
backup bad.
Yes, exactly. The backup of the backup, right? That's what you need. The reason why you want to store it on 2 different types of media is because if you store it in 2 different ways in 2 different places, it is that much less likely that any single event will compromise or destroy or affect those 2 backup copies. And so in the old school days, we used to say, okay, well, back it up to a CD-ROM or put it on a USB stick. Now you can also have that copy in the cloud. You can have an external hard drive or back up to another server, in the office or at another location. So those are your 2 copies. But in the 3-2-1, the one that's most important is the 1. So 1 copy off-site. So if the place burns down, right, it's not going to be compromised. And off network. And because of that lateral movement where attacks can jump from machine to machine, even if you have multiple sites, like you're a growing healthcare provider and you've got 17 different locations in South Florida, you may say, okay, well, I'll back up one site to, this other location. But if they're all still connected with a common backbone, then it is still possible, right, if you don't have good network segmentation, for those backups to then be compromised. So what we always tell folks is that you want as much separation, as much distance, in quotes, as possible. And
Eric Abbott.
yes, exactly. So you want to be totally offline, or if you don't want to do that or you can't do that, then you also want to have it with a separate provider, different team that's managing it. And that's how you can achieve like real network segregation. If you're a single office, right, you don't have another site. Like, what do you do? That's, I think, where the cloud piece really comes in. And then lastly, back on that stat of 58% of attempted recoveries fail, the thing that I would say that people miss the most is testing their backups.
Oh, yeah.
It should be done annually at a minimum. I would say you should do it as part of your regular disaster recovery drills. A lot of small businesses are saying, well, what is that? Is that like, a drill they hold in my hand? No, it is a tabletop exercise or some kind of a simulation exercise where you go through your entire disaster recovery plan.
Yeah.
What's a disaster recovery plan? That is when you simulate, we have a network outage in our office. What do we do? We have a server that dies. What do we do? We have a tornado that comes ripping through. What do we do? Right. So you come out with all these different scenarios. And you think not just in terms of the technology, but also just the business process. What are all the things that need to happen for us to continue to operate or continue to operate at some minimum level, right? To fulfill our contractual obligations or customer commitments, however you define that. And as part of, once you've written the plan, you should be practicing that plan or exercising that plan on a regular basis. So people are somewhat familiar with what they need to be doing in a disaster. And a part of every disaster recovery plan or drill should include testing those backups. And that's just a good way to get into a cadence of doing that. And if you don't do it or don't have time to do it, ask your provider to do it for you.
Right.
That's really important.
Right. Well, going back to our example, because so this environment, this is like circa, 2015, 2016. So, we had a server. Server was a web app, and web app, it's like hey, I enter in information, it saves data. It's kind of like a CRM, but it was on premises. And this specific web app, we were backing it up, and I looked at the server. I look because the server, all it is another computer that just works for a bunch of smaller computers, and it was hosting this web app. And I looked at it. It was good. We rebooted it because we patched it, and Windows always needs a reboot, right? So we patched it, rebooted it, it blue screened. And so like when we restored from backups, it was never ever going to come back up. So like whenever we were backing up this device, like it looked good. I saw it looked good. But if I had taken the time to test our backup, I would know that it was never going to come back up. So that was a lesson learned there. I mean, because we had to rebuild the server from scratch, and our downtime was significantly longer than it would be if we had a backup. So like, we were able to get back up and functioning because it was only a small piece of it wasn't the entire business, but it did cause an outage for a line of the business, which was more along the lines of an entire day versus like, hey, it was like a 30-minute restore or whatever it takes to, to write it from one place to another. So firm believer, if you have backups and you aren't testing it, you don't have backups to me.
Yeah.
So
I agree. You don't, what do they say? You don't pay for backups, you pay for recoveries.
Right. Yeah, I don't care how much you back up, can you restore it?
Exactly.
So good stuff. Did you have another question before we moved on?
I could go on about backups for a million years. I won't, because I'll probably bore most of the folks that are listening here. But the thing
you
that
did warn them, it was a deep dive, and we did say at the beginning, it's like, look, or if you, by the way, plug for our last episode, Buy a Boring Business by by Cathy Miron. No, but something that's it's something that's required. It's stable. It's just protecting your business. If you spend that much time building your product, bringing it out to the public and selling this, then it's foolish to not protect it. And this has come from a business owner myself. Like, I am a prime target for these sort of things. Do we run backups? Absolutely. Do we use Cathy? Absolutely. But this is not plugged. This is not, by the way, this is not a paid piece by by eSilo. It's very much the purpose of this is to have a deep dive into compliance and security and things that we might not necessarily think about as business owners. So,
and the last thing I will say, though, just to bring it up a level for all the business owners and CFOs listening, So one of the things that I find a lot with technology is the boring stuff, the, run of the mill, oh, I know I have to have that, so I just want to do that for as cheap as possible. It's kind of back to insurance. It's, I just want insurance coverage. I don't think I'm really going to make a claim, so just get me the cheapest, insurance policy that I can.
Yeah.
Exactly. The thing that I would tell you is that often we see these types of things get cut from budgets. And the rationale typically is, well, I've got an MSP or I've got, whoever I'm using, and backups are already included as part of the service. So why do I need something additional? And when I do trainings for companies and especially for executive teams and boards, one of the things that I really, really emphasize is within the whole cybersecurity framework, we always talk about defense in depth. Layers of redundant controls so that if any one of those layers fails or is breached or is compromised, you have additional layers of protection underneath that, between the attackers and the things that are most valuable to you.
Right.
And in my mind, backups, it's one of the most basic elements of your data protection strategy. And so instead of thinking, well, I've got, backups from two different providers, that's redundant, I can save money. Look at it as the more redundancy I have, the better business resiliency I have. And so that there's a purpose to having that redundancy there. So that's the thing I just wanted to emphasize.
Right. I think defense in depth's important because security is not necessarily a matter, because like you see a lot of them, it's like, oh my gosh, that's obviously fake or they're obviously phishing me, but it's not. It's a matter of time.
Yeah.
It's not, they hit you with so much that they catch you that time when the kid's screaming or whatever, and like you're trying to do something, you just got to get that email out, or you need to download that one file and you're waiting on it, and wrong place, wrong time, and then it's too late.
I'll give you a perfect example. So my husband and I are both in cyber. So he still does it on the Fortune 500 side, and I'm over here doing it for entrepreneurs and small businesses. One day he sent me a text message and he goes, "Do we have a Wells Fargo account?" I was like, no. Why? Because
Trust us. The bank that says trust us. So yeah.
And he was like, okay, because I got a really convincing phishing email, and had we had a Wells Fargo account, I would have thought it was real.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. People who even work in it,
who know this.
Yeah, I know. It's happened. It's just a matter of time, and it's not something that hey, we had. The thing about it is that's why you have stuff in place to catch you when it. Because I've seen from our aspect, like phishing.
Yeah.
Like phishing's a thing. Like I've seen why it'd be like, hey, I wired out a 6 figures to this person. Can you get that back? Because it was and this happens all the time with title companies. And the answer is, the money is gone, bro. That money is gone.
It's funny. So I have clients that are title companies.
Right.
I have a prospect right now in our pipeline. They wired $1.5 million to the wrong person because the one CFO thought he got an email from one of their suppliers.
Oh my God. Yes.
And that person, that company's CFO, and said, "Oh, we got new account information. Please send this month's wire." And actually, a series of 4 wires went out over the course of 4 weeks, and nobody caught it until somebody actually called up and said, like, "Hey, you guys going to pay these invoices?" And they were like, "What?"
I tell you have to be an idiot to rob a bank or a 7-Eleven or something like that. Because honestly, this is where it's at. It's so lucrative, and for people who are they see us and it's like we are targets because we're not necessarily we haven't ever asked ourselves that question. And they know that, and so it's a matter of time.
And 2 things that are going to make it worse. Well, one's been around for a while. So ransomware as a service. Everything nowadays is as a service.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So you can get some, we used to call them script kiddies, but very junior level people who just go out on the dark web, go to some forum, buy ransomware, follow the SOP, and go and deploy it. And so you have very amateur people. These are, the folks that are attacking you with ransomware are not necessarily like the brilliant developers who wrote it. It's just people who bought this kit. And so the problem with that is twofold. One, the attacks are way more widespread, and we saw a huge uptick during COVID. But the second thing is that they're not always competent to return your data. So even if you pay them, they're criminals, right? So they may not want to return your data. They may not be capable of doing it. And so there was also some stats, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but in that same Veeam study, that said a significant portion of people who pay the ransom don't actually get back 100% of their data. They get back some of it, but not all of it.
I've seen it firsthand, for not our clients, but like as, from stories and friends and, hey, we're in a situation and it's like, at that point in time, I'm just trying to help a buddy of mine out, and it's like, hey, do this, 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 and this, or hey, you're smoked. like, you know, you need to call your insurance, your cyber insurance.
And generative AI is going to make it 10
I was
times harder.
about to ask that question. So how do you see AI impacting this, your space?
It is making, especially phishing emails,
Oh my God.
incredibly convincing.
I knew it was going to be that.
So that's kind of one of them, right?
Yeah.
That's the first one. We're already starting to see it.
Right.
The second thing that I think is going to take a little bit more time, but generative AI, like ChatGPT, right, is probably the one that most of you have heard of, can also write code. And so there have been some test exploitations of, can you get ChatGPT to write malicious code, to write morphing code, which makes it incredibly difficult to detect because every, I'll say, instance of that malware looks a little bit different. And so it's a lot of security tools work based on kind of fingerprints where, you know, we can recognize the same malicious software because there's signatures. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so when you have malware that is dynamic and morphs, then it's really hard to pinpoint.
You have to look at the behavior.
Correct.
Yes.
And so it's a great plug for more advanced behavior, you know, heuristic-based tools for detection and response. Yep. And so anyways, but I do think that we're already starting to see it. But just like anything, there's sort of technological advances that happen on the malicious side.
Right.
But then the good guys have to then use that same kind of technology to reinvent and improve the way that we detect and respond to these things. So it's always like an arms race.
Yeah. Well, it's by definition, you're always playing defense. So, and software is written by humans at the end of the day. Even if it's generative AI, by definition, it's going to have vulnerabilities because it needs to function. And so bad guys look at those things that function and you're always playing defense and there's always a way, you know? And so one final thing, we're about to wrap up. This has been an excellent thing. You know, tell us, you know, is there anything that we haven't covered that you feel like should be covered for the SMB?
I would say that you shouldn't underestimate the importance of having a strategic level advisor for technology.
Right.
Right. It's of course it is important to have someone who's boots on the ground, hands-on keyboard, helping your users, doing all the tactical day-to-day stuff. If you can only afford, you know, if that's the only thing you can afford for your technology, like go get that person, your help desk, your day-to-day IT support.
MSP.
But if you're exactly, yes, an MSP.
Fair.
If you're starting to, you know, be able to afford more, if you're starting to think about really growing your company in a serious way, then you're going to want to have somebody who is a senior level technology advisor for you, and call that a fractional CIO or chief information security officer, chief technology officer, but somebody who can advise your leadership team on the right investments to make, the right budgeting so that you're not overspending or underspending on your technology. Of course, you know, cybersecurity risk and just how you think about IT compliance, data security, you know, all of those things, you keep yourself out of trouble and don't destroy, you know, all of the hard work and all of the years of blood, sweat, and tears to build the company to where it is. Cyber attack is one of those things that could take it away in an instant.
It's always, you know, damn, I wish I did that. And it's like, I should have, you know, and it sucks. And you know, it's honestly the worst professional day of like, it's hard to even magnify because like we didn't even get into the question of like, what do you say to your clients when you tell them, hey, I lost your data? You know, that's a challenge. Like that's something that is like, I don't know. I've never professionally had to be in that position to where I've had that conversation. I've seen other people have it. I've seen people get sued for billions of dollars. You know, Equifax got, you know, they lost everybody's socials a few years ago. So
yes. I worked with an accounting firm that had that exact thing happen where their tax preparer software notified them that there were a bunch of fraudulent returns filed for companies on their behalf. And their MSP did an internal review and couldn't come up with anything. And so it was inconclusive in their opinion, not in mine, but as to whether or not that was their breach or the tax software's breach.
Right.
And so they didn't report and they didn't communicate to their clients. And I would say that it's a really tricky situation when you sometimes don't feel like you have all the facts, you don't have all the answers, you know, the inclinations to hide it or to not say anything at all. And I think that it's really important, especially nowadays, like breaches have become so common, that it's not the kiss of death because you had a breach, but how you respond to a crisis and how you handle it and how you demonstrate that you operate with honesty and transparency, and you give your clients or whoever's affected by that breach or potentially affected the best chances possible of not becoming victim to something. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is you believe or suspect that an attacker might have stolen some of the client information in your possession, and you don't tell those clients. And then the client is victim of identity theft or a targeted phishing email.
Yeah.
And whether or not they trace it back to you, I mean,
They may find you liable.
Exactly. Not to mention the legal obligations that, depending on how many people and in what states, you're going to have to report that stuff. So I would just say that you hire a good crisis PR firm. I actually know a couple, and they can help you craft the message in a way where you're communicating facts. You're not opening yourself up to legal woes, down the line for stating things that, might not actually be true, but still fulfill your obligations for notifying your clients and all of the regulatory authorities.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us our deep dive about Compliance Security Backups 101. I like that. Compliance Security Backups 101 for the SMB. Do me a favor, tell us where we can find you.
Sure. So anybody who wants to have a confidential conversation about their unique situation can schedule with me at meetcathy.com. I have a LinkedIn page where I post a lot of tech tips and helpful instructions and videos. So the short link for that is cathymiron.com. And lastly, we have a budding YouTube channel. So if you go to eSilo.com/YouTube, it'll take you there. I do some innovative things with whiteboards, and we've got short and long training videos, everything that you need to help you with security, compliance, and backups.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much. I hope everyone has a wonderful week. And we are excited that you came and joined us today on this episode of Amazing Entrepreneurs. Once again, my name is Michael Riley. So long, and have a fantastic week.